Hello and welcome. We're coming to you live at our special time from the Democratic National Convention in Denver, Colorado. Now, how much do American voters care about the rest of the world? There's no doubt that the US wields great international power, making its presidential election widely watched across the globe. One of the concerns the international community expresses is that US foreign policy seems to be low on voters' priority lists. On tonight's show, we speak with some of those who'll be making a choice in November to find out how much they're influenced by the voting booth by the approach America has to the rest of the world. Now, those we're speaking to represent various ethnic and religious communities across the country. Ira Foreman is the executive director of the National Jewish Democratic Forum, and Dr. Mahinda Tak is co-chair of the Democratic National Committee's Indo-American Council. I want to welcome you both to the show.
Thanks for having us, Riz.
Ira Foreman, if I could start with you now. The polls that I seem to see put Jewish voters largely in the Democratic camp. In fact, one I saw had pretty much 61%, Gallup poll in April had Senator Obama at 61% in terms of voters, among Jewish voters. Now, how much are the Jewish voters paying attention to Barack Obama's foreign policy stances and paying attention to political affinity to the policies overseas, rather than just a sympathy with the shared experience, as some people talk about, with the discrimination of the black community?
Well, I think that Jewish voters are largely, Riz, like American voters. They are looking at issues like the economy, which really dominates their thinking. They do think about the war in Iraq and are been largely against it even from the beginning. So those are the same types of concerns: healthcare, how the inflation is beginning to rise, gas prices. But of course, with Jewish voters, we also have the issue of Israel. Now, Israel is always a major source of concern in American media. But for Jewish voters, it doesn't come up when you ask them what's the most important issue. Israel rarely is. Israel is more of a threshold issue for them. If the candidates are assumed to be relatively pro-Israel, then they all go to all the rest.
Now, in terms of those who are going to vote for Hillary, who or at least supported Hillary, what chances are they will go into the Obama camp when it comes to the vote in November?
Well, I think the vast majority will, because Jewish voters are quite highly educated, and they look like highly educated American voters. It means that they're pro-choice. It means they're liberal or progressive on social issues like separation of church and state. Obama uses very inclusive language when he talks about his vision of America. So I think the vast majority of Hillary voters are going to go with Obama, and I would guess when all is said and done, Obama will take about 70% of the Jewish vote.
Dr. Mahinda Tak, good to have you with us as well. And
thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. And in terms of the Indo-American vote, now, the Indo-American presence is fairly new on the U.S. Political scene, but it's a very influential group. I mean, it's an affluent fundraising group, yet the representation in terms of appointments seems to be very low. What are your expectations? Are Indo-American voters getting the full respect they deserve for the kind of effort they put in?
I think you hit the question we have been talking about and thinking about it too. But as you know, the Indo-Americans, we have been just very little compared to the rest of the ethnic community. There are probably 2.5 million Indo-Americans, and maybe I think 40% are Republicans, and probably 60%, and then some younger generation who are brought up here. And 2.5 million is not much, but it's, as you know, they're very well integrated, assimilated in the society, and generally when the first immigration came, they started doing other things. But the political thing, which you are talking about, the future generation are thinking about it. But I can give you an example. It's happening in both the parties. I can give you an example, and they do hope that it happens better and better. I give you an example of 4 or 5. In my community where I'm from, Maryland, we have a Kumar Barve from Indian origin. Then we have Jay Goyal, Raj Goyal from Kansas, and one from Ohio. And then a new guy who is just come up. It's amazing. And we also have a civic responsibility, also civic duties, get into civic duties, which they have. Our younger generation is going in the armies. They fought with the war. And some of them, of course, like any other Americans, have been, had a fatal things. But I'll tell you one example of this. The younger American whose name is Ashwin Madia, he was in Iraq for 4 years. He was a Marine Corps, and now when he came back, he's a law graduate from Columbia, and he started running for the election. He said, I am the person, and he got the nomination from the Democratic Party.
But are Indo-Americans paying attention to foreign policy, or have they said, I've come to America, I'm settled here, it doesn't really matter what happens elsewhere? Of course, there's India and Pakistan still to consider.
Yes, I think you're right. Initially, our generation didn't have that. I'm the first generation who came, but the next generation is very much into it, and the next generation is very typical Americans. They are giving. The issues about the foreign policies and India and Pakistan, which you're talking about. Actually, Indian Pakistanis are quite well assimilated, and they don't have that kind of thing. What you think?
Yeah.
They don't have that. They're very friendly, and as far as I see, and they respect now that Pakistan is going to be stable country. They have the democracy, and they're talking about it. They're very comfortable with it.
Good. Ira Foreman, the issue of Iran seems to have come up a lot when I've been reading about what the Jewish American community is concerned about. Iran, potentially the threat it poses to Israel, and also, I guess, the fact that America could be led into further conflict. How much will that play a part when it comes to voters making a decision?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a big issue. I think the Republicans conceivably will try to attack the Democratic ticket on it as not being belligerent enough. But in fact, I think Obama has a good line here, which is, the Bush administration and now McCain like to talk a lot, but they carry very small sticks. And Obama has talked a lot about big carrots and big sticks. We got to use very massive diplomacy, massive use of, if necessary, sanctions. But we need to give incentives to the Iranians too, and I think actually that will work with the Jewish community.
Dr. Tuck, we had an email that came from Australia I'd like to put to you, from S. Anoma in Sydney. And our viewer wrote in saying, in Australia, the Indian community was instrumental in ousting former Prime Minister John Howard from Parliament. They were sick of his policies on immigration and national security. Is the situation similar for Indo-Americans?
Well, I think you're talking about two different things here. Australian immigration policies are very different. America is a very open country, and America is very positive towards immigration. As you see, we all are immigrants here. So their policies are not that bad in Australians. Here, of course, they are concerned, but that is one of the, I would say one of the third or fourth concern of Indo-Americans in the agendas they have. So that's
the comparison isn't as
yes.
easy, yeah. And Ira Foreman, the issue of Senator Obama going across to Israel and doing his visit there, how much did that reassure Jewish voters here?
I think it had a positive impact. A lot of Jewish voters, certainly certain segments of the Jewish community, like the Orthodox community, but other parts of the community that are most involved, look at Israeli public opinion, and Republicans who always are crying the Democrats are not pro-Israel enough, and it's kind of a silly little rant they go into. They were pointing to saying, look, in Israel, McCain is ahead. There was a poll right after Obama left, and then suddenly Obama's ahead. So I think these things are little side issues, but people play little games with them.
Well, let's get a caller on the line from Kansas. We have Travis with us. Travis, what would you like to ask?
Hello, Riz Khan. I've been on your show once before, and I wanted to say this has been
good to have you again.
Quite some time before. Thank you. It's been a little while since I've been on, but does foreign policy matter?
Okay.
I believe so. The very nature of Al Jazeera being broadcasted to the U.S. Market is very important, because those who actually care about foreign policy matters listen to Al Jazeera. There's only one way of actually getting the honest side of the story for us to know. I watch it all the time to understand foreign policy, and I think that the United States doesn't actually engage enough in the foreign policy. I think that we advance our own agenda across the world and don't listen enough to our counterparts and allies, and that's just, my feeling that we actually need to pay more attention to foreign policy and not just talk about it, but actually enact it.
Well, Travis, thank you very much, and thanks again for being on with us. Good to have you back with us. Let me ask Dr. Tuck first, then. How much do you think foreign policy will change with the new person in the White House? If it's Barack Obama, what do you think will happen as far as America paying attention to foreign policy?
I think that's important. That's why I think his assistant, Joe Biden, he's very important in that. And his foreign policy is one of the few, the core values of his foreign policy. He wants a comfortable, he wants a positive foreign policy, a peace, he wants equality for all. It should change, and it would help. I think it will help that he's a very good in foreign policy. We like that.
Okay. Ira Foreman, is there the issue, the issue, of course, the Republicans raise is the lack of foreign policy experience that Barack Obama has. At this stage, assessing him, how do you feel things might change were he to enter the White House?
Well, I think the lack of foreign policy charge is fairly ridiculous. In fact, Barack Obama has a longer voting record in Congress than any president since Gerald Ford. So that, I think, is spurious. But I think that Obama will stop the Bush, Cheney, McCain kind of a policy. We tough talking. We're a swaggering cowboy. I think it's a more welcoming image in the world. I think it'll help us with our soft diplomacy, which we've really neglected dramatically over the last 8 years.
Particularly in the Middle East?
Particularly in the Middle East, yes. I think so as well.
All right. Well, I want to just thank you very much for joining us and discussing the issue from your perspective. Ira Foreman and Dr. Mahinda Tak, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Good to have you with us as well. After the break, we ask an Arab American and a Latino voter what role foreign policy will play as their communities go to the polls. But first, let's hear more of what our international viewers said about what they want from the next American president.
Especially to empower Africans to be able to run their economies. That is basically what we need. Yeah, increase aid to increase the capacity to build infrastructure that Africans are able to run their own economies.
We asked the next U.S. president to open up the border crossings and to find us a solution to the situation we live in, because the situation is really bad and it's difficult for all of us.
I would like to see the next U.S. president as somebody who really cares for the country, our state, our land, our people, and not to give anything back.